Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Femme Portfolio Podcast. I'm your co host, Bryn Bradshaw Mack.
And I'm Rachel Hirsch.
This week, we wanted to talk about the power of navigating your network and setting boundaries for more empowerment in your personal life and your professional life. This was a topic that Rachel and I were actually just casually kind of doing a walk and talk on, particularly how to budget your time and respect your time, even if
Yeah.
you feel like you don't have necessarily the upper hand in the dynamic.
Yes.
So we're going to deep dive into that. But I thought it presented a very good opportunity to talk about both building your network, cultivating your network, how that blends with your community, why those two things might look different, and how to make them work together more and feel more in alignment. So we're going to be breaking it all down.
Also, like how to make your community or network an asset in different ways. And I think, especially
Totally.
coming off of the conversation we just had with Scout from Dessois, talking about how community is and connection is such a huge part of like growing as a person, growing yourself professionally.
I love that. I think that presents a really good opportunity to just talk about, putting it simply, like what network means to you and what
Yeah.
network means to you.
So it's funny that you ask it like that because to me, like networking, I get such anxiety. I think I told you this, but I told someone else today, which I should stop admitting to people. But I have like such mass social anxiety where it's like I walk into the room and so the anecdote is that the other day I had an event and I thought it was like a smaller, more intimate dinner and it wasn't. And I showed up and instead of handling it like a professional adult, I literally did a Yui and walked out. Like the
I
valet
uh,
it was so embarrassing. The valet was like, "Oh, wrong place," and I was like, "Nope,
Nope,
just
just
a
wrong mental psyche. I'm like,
whole
yeah,
lot of anxiety." Yes. And so I think but when I think about community, like anytime I were to walk into like a room where I felt community, I'd be like, "This is so fun," and it would be energizing. And I think there is a reality where like the two intertwine, and there's some sort of like convergence of the two, and that's what makes it an asset. Did I
yeah.
just go rogue already?
No, that's exactly what I want to talk about. And that's what I was like, let's see if we can give any tips and tricks on how to really embrace that. Because I think similarly, I don't love networking events. I love talking to people and I love talking to
Right.
people when we have like-minded things to talk about or
Yes.
similar interests. But I think that it feels there's frequently a disconnect, especially, in an earlier episode, we talk about how to make your work more in alignment to your values and to your
Yeah.
interests. I think that also blends very nicely with this sense of network or the sense of community, and how those two things can be in some ways one and the same, and getting away from the stylized version of your network.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many pieces I wanted to dig into like especially the categories in which I invest in like how community has become like
Yeah.
networking has become an asset. But before we get in there, since we're talking about like struggling with networking, can we talk about a little bit about like challenges you and me have faced when trying to build a strong network?
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely dive into a few challenges I've faced. I think first and foremost, learn the hard way. Not everyone is going to love you. So the more
Ugh,
you show up authentically as yourself instead of doing the
for
like
real.
shape shifting to appease to your audience,
Yes.
you will build a network that is meant to be your network. And that took me
Yes.
a lot of trial and error, like especially going into new environments, whether it was a new event where like the demographic was a little bit different, or whether it was a different job and different, set of coworkers and colleagues. Like it's really easy to pick up their energy and want to match that. But to actually say, like, how do I want to show up and who do I want to be and who is that person? And then show up as that person instead of
Yeah.
they want is
Like that intentionality.
totally.
So
What about
real.
you?
Well, okay, I'm going rogue as per usual, but
I love
uh,
it.
networking is actually what brought you and I together in a weird way. It wasn't community. It was so your uncle Bill, again, shout out to him. He is like my first mentor rabbi when I came into the workforce, and he was like, "You need a female rabbi to introduce me to your aunt, his what now wife." Who, we've just stayed in community and network throughout the years, but that was a pure professional, like business relationship that has, then built over the years where they felt comfortable introducing me to their family. And here we are, however many years later, like
Oh,
what a
that's so cool.
crazy networking turned community into business in a different way reality.
I love that. And that's such important background because it is true. And it speaks to something that I wanted to bring up on this podcast. Back to how to build a strong network and challenges I've faced is also like if you want people to give to you, it really helps to reciprocate and show up for
Yeah.
them. And so, like, an example with that bill scenario is he asked me if he asked for an introduction. And I said, absolutely no pressure. But like to take him up on that, it's like taking people up on their offers, but then actually following through. When he made the
Yeah.
introduction, I was so quick to try to connect with you. And I even followed up with him and, was profusely thankful for the introduction and just like that I didn't drop the ball. And so I think
Right.
reminder of if you want to build a network and if you want people to show up for you and offer those things. I know we're talking about an intro by my uncle, but like you can extend that further to
Yeah,
a show from another colleague, from one of your
for sure.
seniors, from someone else in the industry.
It's social capital.
Yeah. And following through and really just
Yeah.
like showing up for those opportunities.
And I think something for me, at least, that I still do struggle with to some degree is when there is a senior to junior type relationship. Like when I don't think I've offered anything to Bill from a business standpoint, like maybe support, friendship, adoration, but he was the one opening doors for me. And so it's so hard when you are thinking in the context of networking, like I have nothing to follow up on. I have nothing to like offer you or to give you. Like, how do
Yeah.
I keep this relationship going? And I think when it is really authentic and in alignment and like you're just showing up truly as you, that's what creates the longevity and like the give and take in ways that like you might not realize you're giving, but surely you are in some way for them to want to stay in relationship with you.
I love that. And I think even on that, with like the having a natural follow up, there's been times where something has come across my radar that speaks to like what we've discussed and just going the extra mile to share those things. And not to say like pester someone you want to be close with weekly, but like
Or
if
do.
someone comes or try that
Or
and
do.
but if something comes across your radar and it speaks to a conversation you had, even if it was
Yes.
months ago, those little pop ins are so well received. No one's
Yes.
going to receive one of those emails and be like, ugh, why is she bothering me? At the
Right.
absolute bare minimum, they'll be, they'll appreciate that you thought of them.
Yeah.
At the most, they'll reply, and that's a great opportunity to engage. So I
Right.
think like the follow up's happening naturally and knowing to your point,
Right.
not always going to have some specific follow up. Like that's just the flow.
Right. That's like so real with relationships and community broader. When you think about like relationships ebb and flow, sometimes you're naturally really close to people, and sometimes whether it's you move and there's physical distance, things will ebb and flow. And knowing that that's not a closed door and you can keep it open. This is such an anecdote, but it's so pertinent because we were just talking about my friend Tammy. Tamara is her real name, but different conversation. We were really, really close in high school. And this is going to sound so tangential, but it's not. I'm looping it back. She moved to Israel. I moved to New York. I was London. Eventually, she moved to LA. I moved to LA, but we didn't keep in touch. But nothing had ever happened. I sort of blind reached out to her, but there was no closed door. And now it's so nice. Feel like I have family in LA because we go so far back.
So
And it is more than just family. She's helping me in career and things like that. There's so much overlap that you just never know. And so keeping it like a truly open door and weaving things in, like you're saying, even if it has been a really long time, what's the worst that can happen?
I love that. That is so spot on. I think that actually segues nicely into how do you feel like being vulnerable helps those relationships, whether it's in a networking capacity or just in your day to day life?
It's funny because I think of it differently in day to day versus in networking, which is maybe not right. I think vulnerability is actually such an asset. I find myself being more willing to be vulnerable in community versus in networking. I feel like I should unpack that, but we can put a pin in it for now. But some people are so, and it's brilliant in a lot of ways, so calculated with what they share in business that sometimes
Yes.
my eagerness to be vulnerable is almost like can be weaponized. And that's like a really
Mhm.
extreme version. But I think I have learned that being a young woman in a corporate environment, what I struggle with a little bit now is almost the reverse of I was this really vulnerable young girl working on Wall Street. I learned a lot of hard lessons really quickly. And now sometimes I'm like too buttoned up and I enter like a really, startup environment where it's like fun and young. And I'm like writing a very professional business email and people are like put off by it. And so there is some like ebb and flow into that I need to, but I think when I pull it full circle, what it comes to is I am naturally a sharer and I like people to see, the not so nice sides of me, not like in a mean way, but just that things aren't always easy and that sometimes things are hard. And I think that that builds connection when you're like truly honest with people. And I just don't always see the value when it's like, this is my life is glossy. I'm always happy. That's just not real. And I don't connect with people like that. So I think maybe that's why I'm an oversharer to some degree.
But I think that's why one, we developed a connection quickly and why we're
Yeah.
able to with people. And I think that's a commonality that a lot of people would say of the two of us is like that relatability. Like I do think that there's something to be said about being refreshingly real. I don't remember where I learned this, but the idea of the like, how are you? And how everyone defaults to good and just
Yes.
stop saying good. If you're not good, you don't have to say good. You have
Yeah.
to say, I'm okay, or like, honestly, I'm not that great, or this is the stupid thing that's happening, but it's blowing up my, mental
Honestly.
bandwidth or whatever that looks like. And I think that just presents an opportunity. You've let your guard down. And now the person on the receiving end can say, wow, this is someone who doesn't need to
Yes.
be stylized. Like I can share
Yes.
this with her. And that
Yeah.
will let you go so much deeper. I have definitely leaned on that in the like wellness world networking space, meaning all these different events, where when I get there, instead of doing the like few questions to kind of kick things off, I just like start asking people actually what's going on in their day.
I
Or
was
I share like very ridiculous stories
What
typically.
are your like anecdotal questions that you're these are your go-to to like force people to get deeper?
Like I'll acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is that sometimes the events are kind of like stiff or they like take a little bit
Whoa.
to get into. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh, what were you doing before this? Or like what got you here? Or like how's the rest
I
of your
love
week
that.
looking? And the rest of your week sounds like a stylized question, but sometimes, for example, I went to an event a couple weeks ago and there was two friends together and they were rushing from event to event and they were so like overwhelmed but excited because it was some of the first events that they had been
Oh,
invited to.
fun.
And then we just dove deep into like how they got here,
Oh,
what they
I
were
love
taking for,
this.
just like something that's like, oh, you're not just going to hit me with the like, oh, what do you do for work, or like where in the city are
Right.
you living. Not that those are bad, but I just like
But
to like
right.
try to
No,
poke
no, no,
at.
that's so valid. I think like one of the things that I do struggle with is especially in a place like New York or LA, I could go to an event every single. If I
Yeah,
said yes to every intro, it's like, am I ever actually working? And it's that boundary of, okay, well, this is how do you measure net positive or how much value when you don't actually know who's going to be there or all the scenarios or what you could
totally.
theoretically get from it and how you manage your time with yeses and nos. And sometimes it's not like it's just like, I need like my inward time or I need work
Yeah,
time. That's like a really hard one, I think, for people to learn, myself included, and to balance. And it's ever like evolving.
I think I totally agree with you, and I think something that I have flipped in that narrative is like if I'm gonna go to the events, just because I now live in Williamsburg and the logistics of even getting to things is
Oh,
like 30 minutes,
yeah.
and I get incredible social fatigue, which I did not know until recently. So it actually feels there. Yeah, it gets to a window where I felt you on like the showing up, seeing it was too busy at the event, and
Yeah.
turning around. Sometimes I look in and I'm like, damn, this is going to take a lot of my battery.
Yeah.
And so I do think once you get there, once you do show up, reminding yourself that you're there and to make the most of it.
Yes.
And I know that sounds easy, but like that's how I've been able to make so many incredible connections at these events because instead of sitting down and just like going through the motions or getting
Yeah.
there and feeling drained, I'm like, I'm in the room. I might as well go talk to people. And
Yeah.
once you get in, then you find your flow if you start talking
Right.
about crazy shit.
For me, what has also been helpful, and this like, isn't always, an option for everyone, but I know that being in community is fulfilling for me. I know that meeting people is beneficial. I know all of those things. And so doing it on my own terms has been helpful. And that's part of why we started hosting our own events in different cities was
I
because
love that.
like I can curate it a little bit so that I feel really safe and comfortable and excited. And it gives me it's like bowling with bumpers to some degree. It's like
Yes.
I can show up and I'm like, okay, like my nervousness or my anxiousness is like a little bit dulled because I've put this together. Although today someone was telling me she hosts loads of events, like her whole job is like to be community in LA. And her thing is she's always like, you can bring someone, but they have to be interesting. And I was like, what is
I
safety net?
love
Like how much that provides for like I'm more eager to go to her events because I know I can bring someone. I also know that I'm going to meet interesting people there who might not be like, so often you go to events and it's like the same group, which is super
Yeah.
nice, but I know I'm going to meet someone new and interesting because she always has this like plus one thing. So it's like a cool dynamic that I want to start
That
bringing
is
into my events.
a great
Yeah,
one. That's so actionable too for anyone hosting, if you're doing a dinner party, whatever that looks like for
right.
Thanksgiving. I also wanted to expand this knowing that not everyone listening is going to be health and wellness obsessed and maybe tapped into the community of these events, even stepping a little bit wider. I think that something that should really hopefully resonate is the more you show up as you. So, say you're going from a
Yes.
work event to something else, even if it's like a friend's party, any social happening, whether it's a sporting event, and bringing what gets you excited to those conversations. I
Yeah.
say this because I feel like there's a disconnect frequently of like, this is what I do for work, and this is
Yes.
what fires me up. And if you don't get both of those checked, particularly if you don't talk about the what fires you up, you miss an opportunity to find other people in the room that will
Yes.
amplify that conversation and energy. And I think that's taken me a little bit of time. Like I would suppress formerly known as Balanced Sprint, but like I would suppress the wellness Instagram or like kind of keep things off to the side and not really talk about all these things. And then I'd have some friend come over and be like, "Do you know about this? Do you
Yes.
follow her? Are you guys talking about this?" And then once it happened, I would literally find out that I was talking to
Yeah.
someone for 30 minutes who like loves this shit and could talk forever. And so it's just like that reminder of if you want to integrate network and
Yes.
community and have that all work together, you just have to keep showing up as you and bring
Yes.
to the conversation what gets you excited, and those people will find you.
And that goes back to being like authentically vulnerable, like being in
Yes,
alignment and just like,
yes,
sometimes we're not confident creatures and that's okay, but still like knowing who you are and showing up as you every time.
yes. And again, we know it's easier said than done. This
Oh
is
my
like
God.
something I am actively working
Says
on.
the girl who showed up to an event and turned around.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't even get the chance to show up as me because
Nope.
I chose
But
not
on
at all.
some level, I did. I chose myself in that moment because I knew where my battery was. And I knew, when you get to an event, you have to give X to get Y out of it. And I
Totally.
knew I couldn't give X.
Or
And so for me, that was like, I was just refilling my cup. I was just resetting a boundary. And maybe if it happens next week, I'd be able to like go and like,
mhm.
I'd like be there until 4 a.m. God forbid. But, like that was what I needed in that day. And that was me showing up as me in alignment with myself.
I think it's awesome. I am so for not overcommitting or like overstretching. And I think that lends itself to a nice topic. What are other ways in which you manage feeling drained?
I think that balance of network and community. So, like, I have our empowered yoga community, which is even I'll wake up if I rarely go out on a weekend, but if I go out on a weekend, I teach on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And that means I have to like get up and go early. And even if I've gone out and I don't have a lot of sleep and I'm just feeling exhausted, I show up in that community and I feel fuller every damn time.
I love
There is something so like incredible. I am so grateful. I am so lucky to have that community, but it means that I have to really balance the people around me. Like having an asset like that and focusing on using that to fill my cup every time I need is such an asset. It's like Scout was saying in that episode where it's like part of the reason she's able to do what she does is because she has this brilliant community around her of people, and the way she gets out of loneliness is the people, and that's the empowered community for me. Honestly, that's you for me. There's so many people in my life that
you.
help me fill my cup when I feel so low.
I love that. I
What
think
about
this
you?
is, well, I was
Sorry.
going to say, I feel similarly. I would say very like tangibly, I can tell when I'm going downhill from a battery
Yeah.
perspective. And like, I've just done it. It's almost like trial and error. I've just done it one,
Mhm.
two times where I've said yes to something,
Yeah.
been there, somewhat regretting it. I'm just like, "Ugh, this is not how I want to feel
Right.
when I get here." That it has made me more mindful of my battery and trying to preserve it. I think that at the trade off of preserving social bandwidth, it can be hard to nurture my own
Yeah.
and like truly spend time alone or spend time with just me and my boyfriend and like do so in a fulfilling way. But I think beyond that, oh, I remember. I think that this is a great time of year to think about. You made me think
Yes.
of it with the yoga community. And if anyone is tapped into yoga, as I imagine many of you will be, you know how good the yoga community is.
Mm.
Wherever,
Yeah.
whichever you are,
So
whichever
real.
ones you are involved in, it is incredible. I was in Costa Rica last year, and even just for a couple weeks, going to some of these classes was
Mm.
so grounding and so
Yeah.
energetically replenishing. And I say all that yoga might be your thing. yoga might not be. But this could be a really good time of year to like look inward and think about the communities you're tapped into, and think
Yeah.
about, if you visualize it as a circle and you're giving pieces of your pie away, like, are you over indexed anywhere and it doesn't feel draining?
Yeah.
Are you under indexed? I think somewhere where I actually am very under indexed is truly the yoga community. I'm in like the personal training community and I'm in the lifting
Right.
space, and that's all fun, but it's still extremely intense and extremely high
Yeah.
energy. And to find something that's truly grounding would be very beneficial, and I think would
You want
help.
to come visit?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to
I
do
want
a
you to
lot
visit.
of yoga.
I love that.
So I think that's an actionable one. Just put yourself out there. As much as it's easier said than done,
Oh,
starting
yeah.
with even the workout community, any of those classes, just signing up and just like
Yeah.
trying to say something to someone at the end of class.
Yes. That's okay. So when I teach, one of the first things I do is I have everyone introduce themselves to their neighbor, and I didn't realize how like rare that was. I
It's
listen,
so
half the time when I go to a class, like I don't really want to talk to other people because I'm like introverted, and that just feels like I'm here to work out or whatever. But the incredible community that it has created by people just doing something as simple as introducing themselves, like you chose to go to a public class to work out with other people, to
Mhm.
be in a community environment and move your body there. Like let's add a step. Let's add a step where you at least minimum know someone's name.
Mhm.
So I
I
love
love
that.
it. It reminds me of 1 + 1 = 3 type of energy. It's like
Oh, I
you would
love that.
otherwise be alone and you're very in, when you're at a working class or anything like that, you're alone, you're in your head, you're focused on
Yeah.
yourself. The second you know someone around you, you just get
Yes.
to like widen your
Yeah.
focal point a little bit more. And it just makes that idea of like time flying and it just being that much more fulfilling and uplifting. I feel that. That's my personal training class has you say hi to your neighbors and sometimes do like part of the workouts as group workouts. And at first I found it to be very annoying and I
Yeah.
was kind of like resistant. And I met this awesome girl and now we literally text weekly
Me
saying
notice.
we're going to go to. And it's
How
a
fun.
accountability buddy and she is awesome and we walk around after. So I
How
think it's
cute.
like pushing past those little ridiculousness and just putting
Yeah.
yourself out there and trying to tap
Yeah.
into new spaces is very fulfilling.
So nice.
What would you say about like even zooming out a little bit longer or a little bit wider, but beyond even just your network? How do you practice, boundary setting and that empowerment in a career perspective? Because I think you're uniquely positioned where like your career is your life and it is like
Mhm.
you are showing up in your career. It's not like a specific role that you're having to fill. So how does that feel?
It's honestly, it's different because of that. So before, when I was in a more corporate role, it wasn't my life. And someone asked me recently, like, what do you do for fun? And I was like, oh, I work for fun. And it gave me a look. And I was like, no, 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 like I really enjoy, I'm so lucky to do what I do. Going to the studio and doing that doesn't feel like work. Like doing this doesn't feel like work. Talking to founders doesn't feel like work. And so because of that, I think the boundaries, the lines are so incredibly blurred. And I started to notice that I need to nurture other pieces of my life. I need to nurture time with my family. I need to nurture time with certain friends. I need to nurture times with my partner, whomever. And that is something I'm working on.
Yeah, I feel that. And that goes back to the circles, to the pie, and thinking about where
Yes.
you're over and under.
Yes. And that will evolve over time. It ebbs and flows, it changes, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important one. And also being mindful that, at the end of the day, spending time with yourself and looking inward is definitely replenishing, but there's also people and communities in your life that can fire you up and be replenishing,
Yes.
and being aware of where you
Yes.
are getting and where you are having to overgive. I think that is such a healthy boundary to set, especially
Yeah.
in our busy, never
It
ending
takes
city.
time to learn that about yourself, and it's not like one way forever.
Well, much more to come on this topic,
I
but I
love
thought it was
this.
important to do a little
Yeah,
break.
what a good one. Good shouts, Bryn.
Thank you. See you guys on the next one.
Can't
Bye.
wait. Bye.